here with you, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this demo with me for Damien's class.
It's a pleasure. Delightful to be here with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as we begin, I want to acknowledge that we will be recording this time together. And so if at any time during the recording you feel uncomfortable or we bump into something that you don't want us to use the recording, I would ask that you say so. Will that work for you?
It will. Thank you.
Great. So, what else do you need in addition to this permission not to share the recording? What else do you need to feel safe to explore here together?
You know what? It's actually less about feeling safe because, like, I know you and adore you and all that. What I'm aware of is because I'm very excited just to be here with you, and I'm sort of noticing that and wanting it to settle a little bit so I can be present for the supervision as well. So I'm like, I can feel myself wanting to go. "Eat."
Hey, well, that's interesting. I feel a little the same way. So perhaps we can just take a moment or two here for some deep breaths.
Yeah,
Okay, let's just go ahead and do that individually. Will that work?
that's perfect. And I can actually already feel the settling just by acknowledging it. So beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So, what would be most useful for you for us to focus on?
So I have a client who's now a past client, but somebody I worked with for several months, but under the banner of a leadership development program. And I just probably actually a similar kind of delight that I just described, feeling here, getting to be here with you. I had that same sort of feeling. I'd be like, "Oh, I get to meet with this person." Um, from the first time we started to connect, and this was somebody who, the person who kind of does the assigning of coaches for this program, specifically was like, "Judy, I put you with this person." Um, because I think you'd be a really good fit. And it was just like instant chemistry. And this was somebody who really wanted some additional, they they wanted to really make the most of coaching, and they wanted to, it was sort of like they wanted an additional level of empathy and support in the process. And I'm not sure I know like what it is exactly about that, but I'm aware that like when it ended, I didn't want it to end. Like, so there was something about this person and the combination of traits they brought and the way that we worked together that really made me happy. And now I'm actually thinking about a phone call that I had earlier this afternoon where I'm like, okay. There are people who just, I love their brains. Like I love the way they think and move through the world. And so I'd love to see how it impacted my coaching with this person, and what it is about that, either to replicate or just to be paying attention for, so that I am aware enough of it to stay coachy.
So, I think what I heard was this word delight that you shared, and this energizing and a little bit excitement of working with people who you love their brains and the way they are in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. So, where do you think this delight comes from?
The thing that's coming to me is there's something about, there's a quickness of mind. Sorry, something spilled off my table. Um, there's an ability to like put together thoughts and patterns over time. There's a an ability to see big and hone in. Like there's an agility maybe that's really fun to work with. And I'm
Agility.
now actually thinking of both the person I talked to this afternoon and the coachee, like the client, as I'm describing this, because I'm looking for like, what's the pattern that I'm noticing here about what it is that answers your question?
Mm. A pattern and agility.
Yeah. Agility is really resonating as you repeat that for me. So I'm feeling like I want to share a little bit about the client. She's got a very eclectic background. Um, in sort of the see you in the marketing communications kind of world, which is also I used to live in that world to a degree, professionally. And she um neurodiverse and very, like had some really lot of self-awareness, worked with a therapist as well, and we knew the difference between coaching and therapy, but she like between sort of like ADHD, some anxiety, high intelligence, very eclectic background, like just a really interesting combination of like incredibly skilled person who also, like, there was an interesting combination of highly skilled without knowing she was highly skilled or without giving herself credit for being highly skilled. So there's something about meeting somebody who's got that agility. And I think there was also the combination of the when you work with somebody and they transform from not seeing their positive qualities to like reframing from, oh, I have this disability, to I have these strengths, right? Like, to I have this superpower. Like that we could look at it from either angle, and to walk on a journey with somebody who came in sort of identified a few things they wanted to do, and in the process of getting there we also did this, it's like just fundamental, this tectonic shift in how they were viewing themselves in the world, like, and having it so it was a combination of the, like, how they met the moment, like the coaching in the moment, and what they were doing over time. I've lost track of your question, but that's the answer that emerged.
Yeah, my question wasn't important. I'm noticing, Judy, that as you're talking about this, you're doing a lot with your hands, and there's a lot of
Yeah,
what's going on for you? What are you seeing when you're doing that?
it's some of it's seeing and some of it's feeling. Like I almost see like a network,
Okay.
like our brains are connected. Like there's the and we're moving through time together. That's this.
Mm.
I'm wondering too, because there's something about the word partnering is coming to mind. Because this was somebody who would show up like, here's what I want to work on in this session. And then they would also know, like, they knew the supports they needed. Like, especially when we started out, we would talk things through in the session. And then we would make sure that we were really clear on the what is it you're going to be doing between now and the next time we talk, whether it was a reflection or a thing that they'd assigned themselves to do, whatever it was. We were really clear on what that was. And then they knew that they might lose track of whatever, like what was the thread that led us to this thing and what was the intention behind it. So they asked for, like, say we were meeting in a couple of weeks, they'd be like, in a week, could you send me just a reminder? And we'd craft it together and I'd schedule it to send at whatever time they wanted. And that was their prompt too. If they had forgotten, they could check with me on like, what was it this was about? So there was sort of, and that's a level of support. I don't normally do that kind of thing with people. Um, I mean, I'll occasionally be like, hey, if somebody will be like, hey, if I haven't sent it to you by Friday, will you be my accountability buddy? And I'll schedule a, like an email to go out to say, hey, like if I haven't heard from you. Um, or I'll put a reminder in my calendar or something. I don't mind doing that, but I'm very much of the let the client do the work school. Um, so I was interested, and it never felt like it went beyond, like it was never a burden on me. I never felt like I was doing a lot of work, but it was interesting partnering with somebody who knew their own, this is what will happen in my brain, and to figure out sort of like, and what's the best way to support them and making sure the thread remained contiguous to the next thing. And they always did it. They always did the work. And sometimes they were like, oh yeah, I almost lost the thread. And then other times they'd be like, yep, nope, thank you for sending it. And I didn't need it. Like, so it was, but so anyway, partnering. So there's something about, and there are times when they just show up in the sessions and want like a thought partner around how do I, like some of what we're articulating here in the sessions, how do I now frame that to give that to other people, right? Because they were also thinking about, if they needed a resume for something, or if they wanted to go for a different position internally or whatever, how did they articulate some of the strengths that they were starting to be able to see in themselves? So they wanted to like work through that in sessions as well. So there's almost this like thought partnering element to it as well.
You've used that word partnering several times.
Yeah.
There you said it was like our brains were connected. I'm wondering, when you verbalize partnering, what are you feeling in your body?
There's almost like there's an it's almost like I'm picturing like since we were just talking about brains, right? Like neurons, like in neuroreceptors, how there's that. I have a feeling almost like my whole body, my whole front of my body is a neuroreceptor. Like there's this feeling of just being open to whatever's in the field, whatever neurotransmitters are coming my way, like, and I'm available for those proteins to attach, right? Like, so it's, yeah, there's a sense of just being receptive and in communication. Like there's almost like an electric current in the field that is, we are influencing each other in this space. And there's also something emergent in it. This is reminding me of how much I love co-coaching on the team side. There's something about co-creating I used to have a colleague that I did a lot of collaborating with, and it was sort of like we would talk about the power of two, where instead of being 1+1, you become exponentially more than you could be either one of you individually, and more than two, right? Like you become more than the sum of your parts. And so there's an energy is coming to me now too, right? Like there's this, what does it feel like to participate in that relationship? I can feel my breathing, like I want to, like there's a sense of like I'm breathing that in a way that then expands back out again. Like I don't know if you've ever done like heart math kind of stuff where you breathe into your heart space and you generate a feeling of some kind of positive emotion, um, and then radiate that out like through your heart space and then out. And it's that feeling of just like suddenly I don't have I'm unbounded. Um, the radiating feeling of I'm not contained here anymore. I'm now radiating out.
If you notice when you said I'm radiating out that you sat up and leaned in and
Yeah.
opened. Yeah.
And it made me think too about like I'm both receptive, right? That neuroreceptor thing. I'm receptive and I'm radiating. So that it's like both are happening simultaneously.
Mhm. Mhm. When you were describing that experience with your client and what that was feeling like, I could feel the front side of my body, the same sort of radiating, sensing, tingling, including in my hands. Um, yeah. I wonder if your client is experiencing that.
I would not be surprised.
Mhm.
I think it's, but when people just there's that lighting up of like real that appreciation that happens, like not just on a like, oh wow, they helped me so much, but on a yes, and
Mhm.
I'm doing the hands thing again, right? Like there's this sense of
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
there's it's making me think about there's the hand and there's the hand, right? There's the person and there's the person, and but it's the stuff between them that's there's something in that's the magic. When you talked about leaning forward too, I'll bring this in because I don't know if we'll go anywhere with it, but when you said you could feel the front of your body as well, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, but what about the back of my body and your bodies? Like what else? What else is out in this space? Now I'm thinking about what the back tends to mean, right? Like it tends to be like historical. It could be our environments. And on both of those, I'm thinking like, what's the environment telling us we are? Like this person, I'm framed up as having a disability versus I'm going to decide that this is a superpower, and people might how I'm thinking people are seeing me might not be how I have to be perceived. But then there's also history, both in terms of what makes us this way, but also like who are the champions that even led to the possibility of having that conversation. I'm thinking about like the people I know who've helped to shape me and who've educated me and who've shared with me around neurodiversity, that I could even bring that conversation into this coaching conversation. I didn't view it as a disability. I didn't view it as a negative trait. I viewed it because of how I've been shaped. And of course, that then translates into the questions I was asking and the possibilities that were opened up in our conversation because I was listening for not how is it getting in my way, but how is it expressing itself in the
Mm.
positives, right? Like how is this thing a strength? How is this? So I was listening for those things because I knew to listen to them, listen for them.
When you said how I was listening for them and how they would express themselves, I got this little zzz with the word express. I wonder if there's anything there.
I don't even remember what I was talking about when I said that. Was I talking about the traits, like the
You had talked a bit about how this wasn't a disability, that this was her superpower. And so what you were listening for, what you were watching for from your historical reference and the people who had shaped you and informed you so that you could see her in this light
yeah,
and how her strengths were being expressed. And
yes.
that word expressed gave me this little don't know what it was.
Yeah, you just made me think of that whole perception question. So if this is somebody who's been at the receiving end of perceptions, has internalized those stereotypes, whatever, to the point where, or who has been so hard on themselves because I forgot this, or I lost track of that, or I didn't finish this, or whatever, the things that can be perceived as, I want to say weaknesses or faults or whatever, that can be labeled and all that, that they're, so they had received all these perceptions, they had internalized and perceived themselves, criticized themselves internally for decades, right? Like to the point, and that undermined their confidence. And like, so there was so much coming into the space with them, shaped by, they were just walking through the world, being themselves, and had been perceived in or perceived themselves in particular ways. And here I enter perceiving. So they're expressing themselves regardless, right? But like what's the story the perceiver is telling? So that's what I'm wondering about, is where expression meets perception.
Mm. Mhm.
And
Interesting intersection.
right.
Yeah.
And what kind of difference, like what's the implication of us as coaches coming in as perceivers?
Mm. When you ask yourself that question, what comes up?
I actually was wondering, I was like, oh wow, you and I have this space right here too.
Mm-hmm. We do. Yeah.
So where does expression meet perception, and what
Mm.
choices do we make between us, and how do those shape our conversations?
Mm. Powerful. I was reading some in one of the supervision books, Daphne, what, and Michael. Yes. Well, I have the book here somewhere. Anyhow, I was reading about it and I was really struck by the section on the gaze and the gaze that we develop. And I'm wondering if how this might relate to what you're talking about, that I have a gaze that I bring into my life to control my life, but it's somebody else's. It's a compilation of things I learned from everyone else, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. and how that then impacts the person I'm working with, as well as me. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just, I'm thinking how many perceivers we bring into these conversations, right? Like the client brought anybody who's perceived them in the past. They brought their own perceptions that they've shaped over time. I bring mine. I bring those of all the people that shaped me.
Mm.
I bring it here. Go ahead.
Well, that was just so powerful. To me, that is so many eyes
Mm-hmm.
looking at each one of us. And how many of those eyes are looking, wanting to listen to what is being expressed? And how many of those eyes already have an opinion or a judgment or a reflection that doesn't give you the zzz, it gives you the zap.
Yeah. I've got tears coming up in my eyes as you're saying that, because that's it, right? Like it was to walk into a truly, and I don't want to say non-judgmental space, right? But not zappy judgmental, but
Mm,
positive regard space
yeah.
of just filled with potential and possibility of like, oh, wait a minute.
Mm,
If we wipe away, if we start fresh with here's how I show up in the world, I have a feeling of just like, I'm like watching you and I like want to sigh, like as I'm saying it. Like,
uh, it just, I mean, I just want to breathe in and breathe in and breathe in and open up. Mm. So I'm wondering, Judy, we started with this question of what is it about clients that you like to work with? And we've gone in a lot of different places. I'm wondering where you are now, and is that still the question? Is it clients, plural, or was it this particular client?
it was probably both. I think it was probably people in general, and this client was just an embodiment of it. And I was aware of like, being sad when it ended and all that. And I'm one of the things that I'm now reflecting on as we're talking is I love where we just got to in terms of like perceiving, and almost want to say like not wiping the slate clean, but coming in. I almost have this picture of like the client coming in, getting to just shine as they are, and we can make up the new story together. Like, what are we going to do with these things we're seeing? Like, what is the actual impact on the world if I don't walk in with my preconceived notions about what it means? And instead I go, well, wait a minute, look at that. I could also take that into account. And,
Mm.
can it be a more, and it doesn't all have to be positive. Can it just be a more real, realistic, real self-chosen version? But what it made me think of was, is that presence, is that willingness to hold, and the hold isn't even the right word. And okay, so I've just shifted because I was thinking about presence and holding and being receptive and radiating at the same time. And then I was like, okay, but that doesn't happen with every single client in the same, with this same sort of kind of experience. So what is it? Is it this other so okay, with this particular client, this was somebody who showed up thirsty for this possibility of seeing themselves in a whole other way,
Mm.
because they had to be willing to let go of, and it wasn't instant, right? It was sort of over time. They were like, oh wait, I can let go of or unlearn that, and I can replace it with this, and they found themselves believing it like over time, to the point where it was like it felt so solid by the end. They were just showing up saying these things. Like it was just so did they show up both receptive and radiating as well?
And did you show up both receptive and radiating?
Yeah, and what is it about that excited, you described it so beautifully at the beginning, that may give that actually like a supercharge or something? Because I want to say I would like to think I show up receptive and radiating for most, if not all, of my coaching sessions. But what I just went back to the neurotransmitter thing. What happens when the right neurotransmitter hits your synapse? Like what? There's something about that match that makes it more than. It can always be good, but then every once in a while there's a supercharge.
Well, I wish we had more time, Judy. I'm aware of the clock, and I wanted to share just a few things you just said. Receptive and radiating. And for me, I wonder if this goes back to your hand motions, receptive and radiating, and how to keep both of those balls, if you will, in the air with the connection, the partnership, the energy. And the more than and the supercharged. Those are words, as you were just explaining, that really caught my caught my connection here with what you were talking and imagining that we all had the ability to show up with our clients in that way. And I can feel my heart beating rapidly right now. That's interesting. So I'm wondering if there is more that you need from this conversation before we close out in honor of the time.
I just am so appreciative of having the space to kind of unpack and explore that experience with this client, because it was so special, and to then honor it by spending this time with it, and to do, and something about even what we were doing here, right? Like what you were just sharing with me, like I could feel my heart warming and radiating as I was receiving, right? Like, so both are very much happening. I'm responding to what you're sharing, and there's this discourse, I guess, like energetic discourse
Mhm.
process that continually builds on itself. And so there's something about that, what we're even doing here, in making room to go, I see it differently now than I did at the beginning. I got to play with all the facets of it and honor it. And that feels really like I can feel the part of me that was still like, I loved working with this person, is now like, oh, what a gift. So there's a little bit like the excitement is there, but it's settled. It's more sense of what gratitude I can be grateful for. I can be shaped by that experience
Mm.
versus yearning for it to be continuing.
Mm. Oh, that's lovely. Grateful rather than yearning.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. And so what do you want to experiment with from this conversation?
I want to pay attention to that feel. I love that we named it the, and I'm almost thinking of it as a dance, right? The dance of receptivity and radiating, radiance and receptivity. Um, I want to pay attention to that in going sort of in my coaching sessions going forward and just notice the different shapes that it shows up in.
Lovely. Radiating and receiving, or yes, I love that. Beautiful picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
I close my eyes, I see little pink dancing around back and forth for some reason. I don't know why, but there we are. Well, thank you, Judy. And thanks again for your generosity at sharing this conversation. Is it okay with you if Damien were to use this in his class?
It is. If it's useful, I'm happy to have it shared with the class. Yes.
Oh,
I'm
great.
curious too, is there anything you're taking away?
Oh, interesting question. I am taking away, yes, I am. The idea that each time I show up with a client, I could show up with this vision of radiating and being receptive. And you said something about shining as they are. So walking into each session with a client, seeing them shining as they are, and then listening to hear or to hear what they're bringing and where they want to go that day. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. As always, I love being with you and following your thinking and your feeling and where you go with it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop this now as soon as I can find the recording button.